Dayanara and Edmar from Honduras thought their family had finally made it when they reached the US and asked for asylum. Instead, US officials sent them to Guatemala, they say without their consent.
They gave us papers to sign. They were in English. When we asked what they were, they said they just had our details on them. When we saw the asylum officer the next day, he told us we'd signed our consent to go back to Guatemala.
They're not alone. The US is now shipping Hondurans and Salvadorans who arrive at its border to Guatemala to apply for asylum there instead. More than 100 so far.
They're not being informed of what's going on. In the US, they're being told they're going home, and it's a surprise for them to arrive in Guatemala.
President Trump's administration says the country is safe for asylum seekers. Any question that? In the 2019 fiscal year, Guatemala was actually the biggest source of migrants detained at the US border. Over years, it struggled to keep its own population from leaving, let alone taking care of asylum seekers coming in here. The country's one of the poorest in the hemisphere, and the US Travel Department itself warns violent crimes such as armed robbery and murder is common. Gang activity such as extortion, violent street crime and narcotics trafficking is widespread. Added to that, the asylum system here is skeletal. There are only a dozen case officers. Meanwhile, NGOs are picking up the slack.
We've had to provide the migrants with legal aid, medical aid, food, everything. So we know the state doesn't have the resources to offer asylum or even conduct the process.
We asked the US Department of Homeland Security for comment. We didn't hear back. But it's reached similar agreements with Honduras and El Salvador, hoping to reduce pressure on a clogged-up immigration system. That means asylum seekers could soon be sent to two of the world's most violent countries. After a night at a migrant shelter, Dayanara, Edmar and their children are trying to get the bus fare together to get home. They were dropped in Guatemala with nothing but the clothes they're wearing. John Holman, Al Jazeera, Guatemala City.